Welcome to this second part of the video on the great disruptor of the 2022 presidential elections, Professor George Wajackoyah. And in case you've not taken in part 1, you can check the description area below. There is a link that will lead you right back to part 1 of this video. And you can take it in quickly and then you'll be up to speed. So that as I proceed, you know what I'm talking about. There is only one way that this great disruption of the presidential election can be stopped. Only one way. And that is that whoever wins the presidential elections on August 9th wins by a massive landslide. That's the only way. Otherwise, if the two major horses are too close to each other, and we already know that Wajackoyah is going to have a major impact. He's going to steal many votes from both candidates. If the two major horses are too close to each other, folks, we're going to run off. What? And as I displayed in my previous video, part 1 of this video, you don't want to go there. Because a runoff is a deadly animal, very unpredictable. There is no way you can predict where the votes will go, where the wave will go in the second round, in the runoff. And that is why many politicians all over the world, who have an edge, who know that they stand a good chance of winning, fear and avoid at all costs this thing called a runoff, or gopa kabisa. All indications so far are that the Azimio candidate will win the presidential elections on August 9th by a very huge margin. Those are the indications so far. However, politics is very fluid. We don't know what's going to happen next week, let alone next month. We have no idea what will happen just 2 weeks before the elections. In other words, in politics, anything can happen. And something can happen that will change everything, change the game completely. And suddenly, that massive win that was expected of Raila can vanish into thin air. Because after all, where did this Wajackoya guy come from? Everything was so predictable, going like clockwork. Most of us knew what was going to happen. Then out of nowhere comes this weed-loving professor. And everything now has changed. Yes, it is very unlikely that he could win. He will not win, that is true. However, the number of votes he is capable of garnering for himself will disrupt, force us into a runoff. That's what it really is. Politics is unpredictable, and that's why so many of us find it very exciting, because you have no idea what will happen next. You could predict this, something completely different happens. You could be sure of something, and then something unexpected develops and happens and changes everything. That's the nature of politics. And therefore, it would be unwise for anybody to confidently predict that Wajackoya will not be a factor because the winner of the election will win by a landslide. No, you can't do that. Before Wajackoya, you could. But now that this man is in the matrix, you can't. No. Wezi, we just have to wait and see how things develop. Of course, there's no denying that candidate Raila Odinga already has a lot of things going for him. Yeah, for example, the vote of the women of Kenya is in Azimio. They will receive a massive percentage from the women in the country, which is going to be historical, because never before in our history, has gender been a major issue in an election. Never before in our history have women been such a major deciding factor in the elections. But definitely in our elections this year, in August, they will be upende uspende. And it is clear that that vote is headed the Azimio way. So that gives Raila a huge advantage. And it gives him a huge chance of retaining his massive lead over the person who comes in as runners-up in that election, the person who comes in second, which is now critical because of the Wajackoya factor. Let's not lie to ourselves. Even if we are a firm supporter of Raila Odinga, let us look at the reality. Before, there were no issues. He was going to get the 50+1. There were no issues with that. He was going to win the elections. No issues with that. And he was going to win by a sizable margin. And it didn't matter how big the margin would be. Because a winner is a winner. But now with Wajackoya in the picture, if that margin of win is too slim over the person who comes in second, then you can be sure Raila will not be able to get the 50+1. And therefore, it is a runoff. Now let's just take a hypothetical example so that we all understand why the chances of going into a runoff are so high now with the Wajackoya factor. Now we have about 21 million registered voters in the country. But for argument's sake, let us use the figure 10 million, the favorite figure of supporters of the deputy president. They always say William Samoei Ruto will get 10 million votes. Pop! They don't explain from where. Anyway, let's use that figure, 10 million. Now, with 10 million, assuming one candidate was going to get 5.5 million votes, and then the other candidate was going to get 4.5 million votes, that's 10 million, okay? But then a disrupting factor comes in and takes away votes from both candidates, say 2 million votes, 1 million from the candidate who gets 5.5 and 1 million from the candidate who gets 4.5. So that leaves 3.5 and 4.5. Both figures are below the 50% mark. 50% of the votes cast. I think now you get a clear picture. Because for you to be elected president of Kenya, you must get half the votes cast, 50%. You must, plus one vote. Supporters of the deputy president will not want to agree with me. But we have the possibility now of Professor Wajackoya getting more votes than William Samoei Ruto. Oh yes, because the professor has got advantages that could give him more votes. The deputy president's votes are concentrated in 2 areas of the country. Wajackoya's votes are all over the country, in every corner of our republic. Wherever there are young people, you can be sure there are Wajackoya votes. And that could be massive. Nobody really knows how massive, but it could be massive enough to make this professor the runner-up in the upcoming presidential elections. That could be really something, don't you think? Because if we are to be realistic, one way you can predict how many votes a candidate will get is also by looking at their experience, their past performance in a presidential election. Now, both Ruto and Wajackoya have never run for the presidency of the Republic of Kenya. Never ever. This is going to be their first time, both candidates. Well, one can argue that William Samoei Ruto has a lot of experience in presidential elections. because he has been actively involved in those presidential elections since the year 2007. Yeah. Wajackoya has never been involved in a presidential election campaign. However, on the other side, you can also argue that being involved in a presidential campaign, yeah, where you have to follow instructions of the candidate and his close handlers, is very different from being the candidate yourself. Yeah, you're making the decisions. You're the final say. The buck stops at your desk. That is very different. And therefore, if we're to consider it in that way, then both Wajackoya and Ruto have never run for the presidency before. All the more reason why you cannot dismiss Bwana Wajackoya. You can't. If you do, you'll live to regret it. Definitely. Because you just need to go to the ground, yeah, even near where you live, and ask people what they think. You're going to be surprised. You see, Kenyans are fed up. Oh, Kenyans are so fed up. You know, I did a video, I believe sometime last year, where I warned we're heading towards the most dangerous presidential elections. Why? Because we were going to face in our elections for the very first time the phenomenon of angry voters. Voters who are pissed off. You know, when somebody's pissed off, they're unpredictable. They can do something to spite you. Something they would never have dreamt of doing if they were not angry, if they were not fed up. And you see, the tide favors Wajackoya because he's a complete outsider. He has never been in politics before. He doesn't have any baggage he's carrying around with him. Yeah? He's clean, he's fresh. He's a breath of fresh air in our politics. Those things are very attractive right now, especially to long-suffering Kenyans who are very angry. Even as we speak, the prices of basic commodities are on the rise every day. Unga ya ugali has risen to historical highs. Sai mfuko ya busuma ugali is over 200 bob. What? Life is very hard in Kenya just now, and getting even more difficult by the day, which is provoking the already very angry, very annoyed Kenyan voter even more. Can you predict what they're going to do on August 9th? You can't. Anything can happen. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.